So I keep meaning to do classic albums on my channel. I just feel like I'd rather shed the light on albums that are either brand new, newer, or want to see the light of day rather than covering albums that everybody knows about. But I also know that these reviews get a lot more views. So, in that sense, let's talk about an album that I love to talk about, that you guys love to hear about, and is one of my all-time favorite albums. Let's dive into it. Trick of the Tail by Genesis. So I don't think we need an introduction from the legendary progressive rock / pop rock band Genesis, but I'll give a little bit of context specifically for this album, because this was the first album after the frontman of Peter Gabriel left the band. We've got Phil Collins now on drums, and they're looking for a lead singer, and I mean, within the practice, nobody really filled the shoes as well as he did, so he started to sing, and I mean, honestly, he's got an amazing singing voice, so the fact that they didn't just shoo him right in from the beginning, meh. You got Tony Banks still being kind of, at this point, he has stepped up as like the main music orchestrator writer in that case. Every song on here has his writing in one way, shape, or form on it. And then rounding it off, you've got Steve Hackett on lead and rhythm guitars, and you've got Michael Rutherford on rhythm and bass. So yeah, what's a four-piece band to do? Well, they record one of the best progressive rock albums ever. And one of the things that I particularly love about this album, and it wasn't until, many, many listens, is this is how you incorporate your influences into an album proper without making them so apparent, without really like showing them on your sleeves. Like, for example, Led Zeppelin's Kashmir can kind of be felt on one of the best songs on here of Squonk, while also the Trick of the Tail, the title track, feels a little bit like Getting Better from the Beatles. So there are a few moments on here that if you trace back the DNA, you can see the influences, but they're reintroduced and reinterpreted in such a way that they become something completely new. And I wish more bands would do this approach rather than basically just copy pasting into their own music. Now, as I mentioned, Tony Banks, being the lead keyboardist on this, has his thumbprint on pretty much every song on here. But there are two tracks that he gets the solo credit for. I've already mentioned Trick of the Tail, it being the second last track off of this album. It's very bright. It's very colorful. As I mentioned, getting better every day. And I love the overall style of like the storytelling aspect on here, and like each track is its own little vignette of a story. And Trick of the Tail, the title track, is just a fun, bouncy, but also heart-wrenching tale. And like most of these tracks are like that. But I love how Banks is really able to synthesize so many different emotions into this singular track. And the other track that he does this with is Madman Moon. Again, another staple track off of this one. The storytelling and showing the difference between like an absolute desire versus the like internal need. But the thing that I love about Madman Moon is they take the musical styles that they've done from past tracks like The Fountain of Semeliux, even to a little extent Battle of Epping Forest and Get 'Em Out by Friday, where there's this ebb and flow where on a dime the music shifts. For the most part, this track is very melodramatic. It's very whimsical. It's very somber. It's mainly this very soft, almost ballad-like essence. And then on a dime, it shifts and we're in this very up-tempoed, very quick pace, very happy fun times. At no point does it ever feel out of place. At no point does it ever feel like it comes right out of nowhere. It all feels very organic and very smooth. But I've kind of bounced around a little bit in the track lengths. I do want to talk about Dance on a Volcano. Actually, I'll talk about the two bookends. Let's talk about Dance on a Volcano and let's talk about Los Endos. These two tracks, all the boys are found on here in terms of their writing styles. I'm loving Colin's approach to the rhythm section on both of these. I'll talk first specifically about Dance on a Volcano, and then I'll slide right into Los Endos. Dance on a Volcano is big, it's pumping, it really does showcase the split that the band had from like the previous album of The Lamb Lies Down on Broadway, which is an extremely Peter Gabriel album. I mean, in terms of lyrics and styles and themes and whatnot. This shows the 180 switch, where I felt like The Lamb was very dark, very melodramatic, very atmospheric. Dance on a Volcano is very bright, very lush, very colorful, very in-your-face, bam, right off the get-go. And I love the playing styles and the picking styles that are interwoven between the guitars, the rhythm guitars, and the keyboards. And all that's being stitched together with Collins's drum work and his rhythm styles in that. I love how visceral and chaotic this can be at times, while also being very orderly. And it really kind of showcases the band's like need to kind of break away and start something completely new. And then we get kind of the follow-up of Los Endos, which again has the whole writing credit of all four boys. But this one also showcases some of the themes from Dance on a Volcano, as well as Squonk, which I'll talk about next. But it also showcases a B-side of It's Yourself, which never really made it onto the album. I mean, the runtime just didn't quite make it out. You could find it on a B-side, and I think it's in Archives Volume 2, which has a little bit more of like a Mad Moon flow right into it. Like those two tracks were supposed to flow into one another, I believe it is. There are moments on Los Endos that definitely connects a lot of the different aspects of the album. So, I mean, it's kind of interesting to think about what would have happened if It's Yourself was on there, but I also feel like It's Yourself was a little too somber on this album when we already had some pretty somber tracks like Entangled, Madman, Mood, and Ripples. And again, I'll talk about those in a bit. And so I like the fact that there's just like those three tracks on there for the more somber moments, and It's Yourself was kind of off on the wayside in that case. But still, this driving force of Los Endos, and I love the different build-ups and payoffs on this. I mean, it's a progressive rock staple at this point, that massive build up towards the massive crescendo at the end of this, where Phil Collins comes back and begins to reprise some of the Supper's Ready lyrics, which essentially is a nod and a wink to Peter Gabriel. So now I've talked about the two bookends. Let's talk about some of the meat and potatoes on the inside. Let's talk about Entangled, one of the Steve Hackett tracks on here. It's really just Steve Hackett on the guitars and Tony Banks on the mellotron, providing some atmosphere. It is just, again, heart-wrenching. I love the tale of this, talking about the patient and nurse relationship, both in a clerical, like, healing relationship, but also within a clerical monetary, like, hey, you got to pay your dues in that case. And the music on here is just so heart-wrenching and so somber. Hackett and Banks, whenever they team up, they always provide something extremely special. And the play out of this, where Banks is really able to provide this very ethereal, very otherworldly sounds. It does kind of sound as though this chap couldn't pay his dues, and now he slipped off into the other world, because it does kind of feel like that being slept off. Then we come to the third track of Squonk, and Rutherford and Banks are particularly great on this one. The rhythm style that Rutherford is able to really harness and put down. I love the quirkier aspect of this. I always felt that this was a much more quirky aspect of the more chaotic Dance on a Volcano. They're both very aggressive. They're both very in your face, both very bombastic in that sense. And I love how Squonk tells the tale of this North American creature, mythical creature, where once it is captured, it basically cries so much that it turns itself into a bunch of pool. And so it's talking about this hunter that's searching for this creature. Once it finally captures this creature, it's an act in futility, because he just cries himself into oblivion. And it really goes to show that, it's that reach being further than your grasp, or your grasp being further than your reach. And it's this need for something more. And again, this mythos is also found within Madman Moon. But I love Squonk, and growing up, I used to think they were called Squonk because that rhythm section sounds as though it's saying squonk, like squonk, 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 squonk. But in fact, it's about this mythical creature. So if we're talking about those quirky aspects of this, Robbery, Assault, and Battery, one of Colin's big tracks off of here. I love this track. I love how, again, that more quirky aspect of storytelling is found on this. If the quirky styles of squonk was found within the music, then it's the quirky styles within Robbery, Assault, and Battery, which, again, the actual like storytelling aspect is very similar to the Battle of Epping Forest, of Get 'Em Out by Friday, where it's basically this cops and robbers relationship that's being found on here. You know, it's the robber that's got this very astute and precise personality. The police officers that are trying to arrest this guy. He's just like, hey, man, you got the wrong chap. And I really do like almost like the Dickens style of a character that's found on here. You know, almost cartoonish in that sense. And I really do love the fun aspect of this. And if we're talking about, you know, the fun aspect of things, let's talk about that last track that I haven't talked about, the second track off of the second side of Ripples. Banks and Rutherford, again, teaming up after the quirky aspect of squonk. We get the 180 of this, and it really is telling about the loss of innocence. It's talking about the loss of youth and appreciating what you have in the time and the passage of time once that's being removed. This is still by far one of my ultimate favorite tracks from Genesis, especially once we get into that Banks play out on the keyboards. Man, his use of that high notes with Rutherford's use of the bass pedals. I don't think like Rutherford was so good at capturing all of those bass notes on his feet while playing the rhythm guitar that it really grounds the track into this concrete foundation that allows Banks to just soar so high. And it really is the dichotomy of the two. You know, you've got those high up in the clouds, very ethereal keyboard planes with the rhythm section being so grounded on the earth that it tethers the two. And essentially, you're just holding on to the tether. Ripples is such a heart-wrenching track once you actually get down into the nitty-gritty parts of it that, man, those are all the songs. You know, those are all the deep dive songs. And one of the things that I really do appreciate of this album is how it's able to balance so many different things so very well. You know, like each track is paired perfectly with the one that came before and the one that came after. You know, Dance on a Volcano being bombastic, Entangled being very somber, very short, Squonk, again, being very quirky, being very big, and then Mad Mad Moon being very somber once again. So each track is paired perfectly with the one that came before to help elevate it up into a new setting. The same can be said for the second side of the album, Robbery, Assault, and Battery. Fun, quirky storytelling. Ripples being very somber, very like introspective, being very thoughtful. Trick of the Tail being very bouncy. Again, another very fun tale. And then Los Endos just being a massive crescendo that sets the album home. So not only within tones do we see that there's a great passing the baton, but also between tracks as well. Not only are all the individual tracks so beautiful and so well constructed, but the way that they're placed on this album as well complements one another. So yeah, absolutely. How can you not love this album? This is by far one of Genesis's best work, and it really did go to show that even though their frontman of Peter Gabriel, which did help shape their first 5 to 6 albums before it, wasn't necessarily the linchpin that was holding these boys together. They could go out on their own. You know, it's the little baby bird flying out of the nest for the first time and showing they're going to be fine. For the actual rating of this one, how can it not be? Let's say it. Trick of the Tail by Genesis is an absolute masterpiece.
We're not worthy! We're not worthy! We're not worthy!
You know, this is one of those rare albums that really anybody can listen to this and enjoy it in one way, shape, or form. So, yeah. I mean, there's a reason why this is my second favorite Genesis album. First one, of course, being Selling England. But I've already talked about that one enough. There you go. There you go. So what did you guys think about this album? Do you love it? Do you hate it? Whatever you thought, please let me know by commenting down below. And I think that's all I've got. Thank you all so much for watching. As always, you guys are definitely the best. And until next time, notes out.